Well, I'd say the Trump campaign just got some really good news, ladies and gentlemen. Really good news out of a couple of polls. You know, a lot of people aren't even talking about this, including the company that did the poll. They don't seem too excited. I wonder why that is, Fox News. Anyway, we're going to talk about these new polls. We got to talk about the Walz versus Vance debate that just got scheduled on CBS News. Disney has a brand new Snow White disaster, as if more bad stuff couldn't happen to Disney. And is Harley Davidson about to go the way of Bud Light? You're not going to believe the sound I have to play for you from the CEO of none other than Harley Davidson. Welcome to the show, everyone. I'm Trish Regan. Good to have you here. Make sure you subscribe, make sure you like, make sure you share. It's important. I cannot state enough how important it is right about now, okay? Because there is a lot going on. We begin today with incredible poll news. I think that Fox is a little depressed over this poll news. I mean, they came out with a new poll today, but they're not too excited about it. Let me give it to you first. Then we can talk about how depressed they are. But anyway, here is the numbers for you. We've got this. Oh, well, this is their readout. We'll start with that. Fox News poll, new matchup, same result. Trump's best Harris by 1 point. And then it goes on to say highest share of voters in over 2 years rate their personal finances positively. What is that, guys, right? What is that? That is like the most negative right through I've seen for a poll like this, 50-49. I mean, that's kind of a big deal given all the stuff the New York Times has been feeding us lately. So he's ahead. He's ahead by a point. I mean, I know it's not 5 points. I know it's not 8 points, but it's a point. And it's very different than some of the more recent polls that we have seen. So let's go back to that article that was written by the woman who does all these polls. And here's the headline. New matchup, same result. Trump best Harris by 1 point. And again, she seems to be making a point that, you know what, people are excited about their personal finances. So, he's not going to have that edge anymore. Let me just say, he's got an edge. He's got an edge in every way when it comes to the economy, when it comes to inflation, when it comes to the border. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. So Fox, I realize maybe he's not your preferred choice. I mean, we know he wasn't the preferred choice, at least as far as the primary goes, but I'd be kind of excited about this if I were a Republican, right? If I were a conservative news network, I might be having a little bit more of a party. But by the way, it's not just Fox that's come out with some good news. On the poll front, I want to go to the Rasmussen poll that just came out today as well. Here we go. Now, this is a biggie. 49 Trump, 45 Harris. Brand new today, Rasmussen reporting this. If we go deep into the poll, you can see here the latest Rasmussen reports nationwide telephone and online survey finds that in a two-way matchup, 49% of likely U.S. voters would vote for Trump, while 45% would vote for Harris. 3% said they'd vote for some other candidate. 2% are undecided. The findings are just slightly changed from a week ago when Trump led by 5 points at 49 to Harris's 44. So she's gained a point there in the Rasmussen poll. I'm not sure why anybody would really vote for her. I'm just going to throw this out there because I don't know who this lady is. Do you know who this lady is? Other than, well, she's certainly got a record of being pretty left, but lately she doesn't seem to want to tell us anything, and she flip-flops on everything. Let's take a look. New York Post putting this one out. First, she was like, no fracking. We're not going to have any fracking. We're all about green energy. And then the reality kicked in. That she needs to win Pennsylvania, right? Hillary tried that. Remember, she was going to get rid of all those coal miner jobs. That didn't play so well with Pennsylvania voters. Then there's that Green New Deal that she used to be all for. Now she's not really into that anymore. In fact, she's actually stealing some of the policy ideas from Donald Trump, including no tax on tips. That's in vogue now. I mean, we talked about this the other day, how the media covers these things. Unbelievable, right? CBS News panning him when he said no tax on tips and then praising her when she said no tax on tips. So there you go. Open borders was all the rage, right? She didn't want to close any borders, even though she was border czar. She was going to look at the root causes of immigration, and that's how she was going to solve it all. And now she's like, I'm going to guard us. Well, I don't really buy that, given that she just also said, hey, I'm going to open up all the detention centers on day one. We played that clip for you the other day. Mandatory gun buybacks. She's no longer about that. She's all about, we have a Second Amendment. Suddenly, she's recognizing the Second Amendment. And then there's this one, socialized healthcare. She was all for this. and apparently not so much anymore. But we have it all on tape. You know what, ladies and gentlemen? That is the beauty of the internet. And Kamala Harris, you can try and try and try to manipulate headlines, going so far as to actually buy headlines and put in other news networks' graphics next to the headlines you've created as ads. I mean, it's outrageous. It's unbelievable. That was in yesterday's show. But here's the thing. We, at least yours truly, knows who you are, because it's all out there, a matter of public record. Let's cue the tape on what she had to say about socializing medicine.
I'm proud to co-sponsor it. It is about saying that this is about a right, not about a privilege for a few. And let's be clear, it is not only about what is the right thing to do morally and ethically. It's also smart in terms of the fiscal impact. Taxpayers will benefit. You know, our friends in the private sector, they talk about all the time. If they're asking about, are they being efficient? Are they being effective? They ask that question with 3 letters. What is the ROI? Return on the investment. And I am proud.
Oh, it's a big term for her, you know. ROI. Anyway, the point being that she used to be for socialized healthcare. Now, because it's politically not so expedient. You see, when you look at the polling, nobody really wants socialized healthcare. They want to have control over their healthcare. And so that's not working. Not working. So you can flip-flop, but you know what? When we go back in time and we see what you really were about, we know what you're about, Kamala Harris, and that's why I don't understand why anybody would want to vote for the woman. I mean, look at where she was back on June 28th. She was way behind Donald Trump. In fact, when you looked at her polling, Biden was performing better than Kamala Harris. But no, she got anointed, she got chosen, she got picked, and she really did. I mean, think about what went into creating the Kamala persona. It's like they're creating some kind of Hollywood star. Take a look at Time Magazine. They're doing their part. Time Magazine had a picture of Donald Trump, like, you know, melting. And then there's this picture of Kamala looking all glamorous on the cover of Time. I'm telling you, it's getting kind of nauseating. I must say, we're getting sick of it. But I hope people out there, and it's important you subscribe, you share, you like, you comment, you tell people about the show, because it's really important that people actually hear the truth right now. You're not going to get it from the mainstream media. There's way too much money involved. There's way too much on the line for them. And as a result of it, you know, you see stuff like this. I mean, this is pathetic. Credit goes to Sophie Delacouille, who put this out on Twitter. I mean, side by side. Okay, Time, tell us how you really feel. There used to be a time when actually you would pretend as a journalist not to be so biased in your opinions. You'd try and have some semblance. I mean, they always were. You know, you can go back to the days of Watergate and you're going to start to see a lot of liberals in the media. So that's been around forever. I've been in the media since, well, going back to the year 2000. I mean, I've been at these networks. I know how it works. I know who's there. And I can tell you they're very, very liberal. And so I think they're personally liberal. But in addition to that, you have management that's extraordinarily liberal. We learned recently that the head of ABC News, owned by Disney, by the way, the head of ABC News, owned by Disney, is so close to Kamala and Doug, that she actually introduced the two. You know, Kamala wouldn't be married if it weren't for the president of ABC News. How do you like that? Talking about incestuous, right? Now ABC News is holding the first debate. Thank you very much. ABC News gets the first presidential debate. CBS News gets Walz versus Vance. Just coming out today, everyone. They finally get a debate over on CBS News. Kind of the third-rate player and everything. I used to work at CBS, so I can say this. I remember I'd call people to come on the CBS morning show, whatever they called it. I can't even remember back then. It was like the CBS early show. That's what it was. And I'd have to explain it to people and say, well, it's like the Today Show, only at CBS. Because they were so low in the ratings, nobody knew who they were. I eventually went on to be at the Today Show, so I know how things go there too, okay? Anyway, look at this. Breaking news. Vance and Walz agree to October 1st debate. Whoop-de-doo. All right, he's going to lap it. Like, I actually think there is no chance in HELL that Walz sees the light of day on this one. 1, I don't think he's that smart. 2, I think he's a socialist. And 3, it's all going to get exposed, because guess what? Vance is actually, for all those that want to criticize him, he's actually kind of a smart guy. And he went to Yale Law School. He's part of the JAG program. He actually went overseas, unlike Mr. Walz, who avoided having to go to Afghanistan. So JD has real economic chops, real speaking chops, communication chops. He was a lawyer. I'm telling you, it's going to be really fun. I'm actually looking more forward to that debate in some ways, which is October 1st, by the way, than anything else, because I think that Walz is going to get exposed. There's an article in the Wall Street Journal this week about Governor Walz from Minnesota pointing out that the guy has literally like zero net worth. Like he doesn't now. You know what? I realize it's hard, but he's been earning six figures for like a really long time. And yet he has no investments, none, zero, zip, nada. Like he doesn't own one stock, which tells me a couple different things. Okay, so either Governor Walz is just dumb and can't figure out a way to actually invest. I mean, like I shouldn't be so harsh just to say dumb. You know what? That's mean to me. But you should invest, okay? And you're going to hear me preach about that because I am just a big believer in the importance of investing and compound interest, et cetera. So he has not one stock. He doesn't own his home. I guess he doesn't want to own anything, which tells me the guy might actually really be a socialist, right? Like, I mean, all things being equal, you look at his record, the importance of some things versus other things. You look at how he clamped down there in Minneapolis, right? When 2020 came along, and it points to him being kind of a dictator-like socialist, which we don't want here in America. You know what? They have that in Venezuela, and it hasn't worked out so well. Mainstream media, by the way, speaking of CBS News, they used to love Venezuela. I was a correspondent at CBS News back when my first trip to Venezuela, to Caracas, was, well, this is going back quite a few years because Hugo Chavez was still alive. And by the way, he was riding high. He was riding high because oil prices were high. But at the time, we all knew inevitably it was going to fail because he had nothing real there. He put all his buddies in charge of the oil company, PDVSA, which is run by, well, it's still run by a crony of now Maduro's. And so they kicked all the companies out that could help them, the US companies, the European companies, and they took it over because, it was those big bad Europeans and those bad Americans that were taking the resources of the people. And we were going to give it back to the people and we're going to redistribute the wealth. And woo. I mean, hey, scary, but it kind of sounds like Kamala and Walz a little bit, right? There's shades of that going on for sure. And so they got it all back. Everybody, I remember CBS going down and doing a big story. I was there to cover the oil stuff, and I had a very critical look at what they were doing. But they sent a correspondent down who was like, this is the future of healthcare. Look at this great socialized medicine. Isn't it fantastic? Not so fantastic, right? You look at Venezuela today. I'm telling you, we don't want to be that. So CBS News gets the interview. We'll see how that one goes. ABC News can credit themselves, and Disney, because ABC News, The View, ABC News is owned by Disney, even though Disney desperately wants to get rid of this company because, well, it's legacy media. And the game's on here, right? It's here. And that's why I need you to make sure you subscribe, like, share, all that stuff. I mean, this stuff is changing. Occasionally we have some technology issues, but we're willing to overlook that because you know what? It's good to be free. It's good to be free and to be on one's own and to be independent. And I think that the value in that is enormous. And more Americans and all around the world, people are coming to these platforms because they want that independence and they want that clarity and that viewpoint that's not cluttered by the big institutions and all the money that's backing those institutions, like you get over at the likes of Disney and ABC. Speaking of Disney's got a whole new problem on its hands. It seems Snow White, so dear. Snow White is just exactly the train wreck we predicted it would be. So they're out with a new trailer and they get a whole set of new problems, in part because of the trailer and then a whole bunch of other stuff, which we're going to get into. But I want you to see this, right? Don't forget before we watch the trailer, what Disney has been up against with Snow White. Because, the story is Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And that's kind of not so PC nowadays to have Snow White. I mean, it's snow, and it's white, right? Like that's not PC. And the Seven Dwarfs, which they apparently spent like a year and a lot of money on consultants trying to figure out how they were going to deal with the Seven Dwarfs. And the upshot was that they just decided they would cast tall people, like normally sized people, and no dwarfs. And they would make them male and they would make them female and everything would be great, except that, you know what? A lot of other people that aren't so tall didn't like that very much, as you can imagine. And then the other thing that, they're dealing with is they cast a Hispanic woman, or she's at least half Hispanic, and wears that very proudly and identifies as Hispanic, and that's all great. She doesn't speak Spanish. I do. Yo hablo español, pero ella no. Anyway, so they put in Rachel Zegler as Snow White. And look, I don't really care, and I can suspend disbelief on a lot of stuff, except when it comes to Gal Gadot being the evil step queen who's jealous of Rachel Zegler's beauty. Because that one I don't get, okay? That one I really, really don't get. And tell me if you do, because look at this trailer and tell me if this story makes any sense with Gal Gadot and Rachel Zegler. Watch.
So, whistle while you work. Whistle while you work.
Magic mirror on the wall. Who's the fairest one of all?
Okay, so it's supposed to be a whole, I don't want to interrupt it. Was it gonna, yeah, I think it was over. But it's a whole new remake of Snow White. And Rachel Zegler, the Broadway actress, 20 some odd years old, that is playing Snow White. She's like 23 or something, she's a young girl, who, by the way, was great in West Side Story. I mean, she's got a nice voice, and, she came from High School Musical Theater stuff in New Jersey, and she's very woke. We'll get to that in a second. But, she did a nice job in West Side Story. But then we got to see a little more of her, and she started to get super political. And in being so political, she has taken on this Snow White thing and admitted, she never liked Snow White, never liked the character Snow White, doesn't like the character Snow White. And so I guess it involved a little bit of acting. Her point being that, who's going to wait around for some prince to sweep you off your feet? Because, that doesn't matter, right? You should want to become president. You should want to become CEO. You don't need some prince to come sweep you off your feet, you silly girl. Except that if you think about it, the prince is kind of looking for a really great girl too, right? Because that's sort of how we procreate in this world. And one should, in my estimation, be seeking a relationship with someone that you will love and cherish the rest of your life. That actually should be a priority. But not for Rachel Zegler. She's trying to point out, you don't need a guy. You don't need, it's a direct quote, actually. She was on the red carpet event at something in LA, and she's like, well, we'll see if the male actor even makes it through, because, this is a new Snow White, baby. Anyway, that's neither here nor there, other than, we can go back to, I'm sorry, but the evil step queen is just one good looking woman. And so this whole Rachel Zegler versus Gal Gadot thing doesn't really make any sense. And you wonder what the tension was on the set, right? I think there was a little tension there. Yeah, I just get that feeling because I'm looking at some of Rachel's tweets. This little Broadway actress tweets out, I love you all so much. Thank you for all the love. For 120 million views on our trailer in just 24 hours. The trailer you guys just saw. Sorry, you contributed to that, I guess. What a whirlwind. I am in the thick of rehearsals for Romeo and Juliet. Woohoo! So I'm going to get out of here. Bye for now. And then she comes back because whoopsie daisy, she forgot. And always remember, free Palestine. Because you got to work that one in there, right? You got to work that. So was that a little bit of a dig? I mean, on the evil step queen, the Gal Gadot, the real prima donna of the actual film? Like, could that have been just a little bit of a shot at her? You wonder, because don't forget, Gal Gadot is from Israel. And she's been outspoken in her support of Israel. And because she's from Israel now, look at what's going on. This is being reported in the Jerusalem Times. This is the headline. Snow White film faces anti-Israel boycott, calls targeting Gal Gadot. Activists slamming new Disney film for casting Israeli actress, while her co-star, Rachel Zegler, talks about free Palestine, as I just said, alongside the trailer. So what the heck is that about? Right? Like a little tension on the set, a little bit of a cat fight going on behind the scenes. Rachel Zegler not liking the politics of Gal Gadot. Or maybe it's not even that. Maybe actually Rachel is the discriminatory one because she doesn't like that Gal Gadot is from Israel. Oh, this is a narrative that's not going to fly anymore. Did you see what just happened to the Columbia University president? My alma mater, by the way. I used to be proud of that. Can't say that much anymore. Disgusting, the behavior that we saw on campus. Absolutely disgusting throughout the entire year. And then it was continuing on through the summer. I have a friend who's starting medical school there and who's worried. She's like, oh my gosh, is this still going to be going on? Because like I actually need to go to school. And it's kind of a big deal, right? To go to their school. Well, the woman who was the first woman, originally born in Egypt, went to London, I believe, when she was about 5, and she was raised like internationally, sort of here in London, went to London School of Economics. I was psyched. I was like, oh, great, they get a woman, they get an economist. She was a train wreck. She was a disaster. She's out. So Claudine Gay at Harvard, now this woman at Columbia, and it's in part, well, there's a variety of things going on, but the tipping point was just what we're seeing even within the Rachel Zegler, Gal Gadot scandal. Disney's got a problem. I mean, Disney has, how are you going to get your way around this one? They want to have their cake and eat it too. And they think they can be all things to all people. But most importantly, we got to be things to these minority communities of transgenders and this, that, and the other. And the American public's like, wait a second, I don't want it. Like, I don't need it. I don't need to see your Snow White. Ben Shapiro and Brett Cooper, they just made a Snow White. I'll go see that one from Daily Wire. Thank you very much. Like, you don't need Disney's entertainment right about now, not if they're going to force feed you something that you don't want to see. And they just don't seem to quite realize that when you look at that company. And we've talked about the valuations, and Don Bacca, who's one of our viewers here, he hates Disney. I don't know if you really hate it, but you hate it as an investment. Maybe when it gets down to the 80s, Don, right? You'll take a look. But the point being, like, as an investor, this is a stock that was up around 200. It's been just sliced in half. There was an activist investor, Nelson Peltz, who tried to kind of save him, give him an opportunity to rework things, not keep depending on sequels, for goodness sakes. You can't just remake everything to death. You got to actually have some new creative content and some content that people actually want to see. And for whatever reason, the woke creative geniuses at Disney just can't get this message through their heads. And they keep coming up with sequels, and bad ones at that. And so the company is now increasingly relying on its experiences division. Rob Horton, my colleague at 76 Research, big plug for Rob because he's brilliant, great stock picker. I've known him a long time. Great guy. And he and I have teamed up for 76research.com. And we have a lot of great ideas for you. And I encourage you very much to go and subscribe to the 76 report, to get the model portfolios. There's 3 of them on there. If you get all of them, you get the 76 report too. You become what we call part of our Founders Club. And so that's the best value. I'm just going to throw that out there for all you investing folks that like to invest. The best value is the Founders Club. So Rob wrote about Disney, and you get the whole archive so you can see everything. And fortunately, we're beating the market, thank you very much, which is not an easy thing to do, incidentally, overall. But he's brilliant, and I'm not so shabby myself, right? So anyway, we've done pretty well, and I'm excited about that. I'm super proud. We've written on Disney before, and what we've discovered is that is a company that really, its entertainment division is just a mess. It's relying on its park and theme experiences and its cruise line and all of these other revenue streams. And that's great. But at some point, like, what are you going to do? We're going to spin off the film division? I mean, I know Bob Iger wants to sell ABC News. Thank you very much. And all the news stuff, even ESPN, right? Because this is the future. Do you know, I just went, oh, I got to get this picture for you. Maybe I'll post it on Instagram, my Instagram account. Go check it out. Go check 76 Research out too. But I just went, my son dragged me into the Apple store to see the Apple Vision Pro. And I'm like, I actually had to go because one of the other kids, her computer had broken. And I had to use my Apple Care and get the whole thing fixed. But anyway, we went in, we saw this Apple Vision Pro. And other than a little bit of vertigo that I had after seeing all this, because you get like this 360 view, it was incredible. I mean, you could actually, as this pans out and as we get new variants in the image quality, you could be right here with me in the studio if you'd like to, because that's where this is heading. You can go to a sporting event and be on the front line. And this Apple Vision, but it was really amazing. It was kind of heavy on my head and it's super clunky. But this is the first version, ladies and gentlemen. And so it's part of why I'm so optimistic on tech, even though a lot of people aren't. I'm a firm believer that this is changing fast and it's going to continue to change, and you want to be there. You want to be invested. Hey, Tim Walz, who doesn't own one stock and is proud of it. Really? I mean, I don't want to be Venezuela, okay? Thank you very much. I think we need to believe in our capitalist enterprises. But if Disney can't figure out how to shed its core businesses, its legacy businesses that are increasingly problematic for it, then I think that is going to be a challenged company, and also just ripe for more activists to come in and try to squeeze out some value, because there is value there. They just need to be able to unlock it. So another problematic time for Disney. Another company that doesn't quite seem to get it, shall we say, happens to be Harley Davidson. Harley Davidson in the news right now because, well, they're kicking American workers effectively, if you read some of the headlines, quote, in the teeth by moving some production to Thailand. So, it's an American bike, it's an American thing, kind of like Bud was, right? But they're sending some jobs over to Thailand because I guess it's cheaper, which doesn't really fit with the whole, made in America thing, commitment to our roots, et cetera. So some of the people are kind of mad. In fact, the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, they lost their jobs when Harley Davidson closed in Kansas City in 2019. At that time, the company had said that it was building its facility in Thailand, and it was going to move all those jobs there. And they said they had to do that because there were tariffs in the EU, et cetera, et cetera. So, people have been kind of angry with this company. You do have all these jobs now moving overseas. And then there was this. So this, to me, is like a Bud Light moment. There's a guy named Robbie Starbuck who's an influencer online, and he's kind of made a big thing of this. This is like his thing, right? To go after these woke companies. And while I don't believe in actually just targeting companies and trying to find, like, when there are reasons by which a CEO, and in this case, it is the CEO, a German guy, when the CEO is putting certain values ahead of shareholder values, then you have a problem. His name is Johann Zeitz, and he became a member of the board of directors of Harley Davidson back in 2007. He had been at Puma, and that was his big success prior to that. But here's my concern. And wait till you hear what he said. His background is all in, well, all the DEI stuff that kind of, if you ask me, is increasingly out of favor right now. That's how he started at Harley Davidson. He was like, the green inclusive guy, and then became the CEO. Because apparently, when they made him CEO, this was so in vogue that they thought the more whatever they could be, then the more profits they would make, except for the fact that they keep forgetting who their core customer is. You really see like a Harley Davidson biker enjoying hearing this German guy say this? Watch.
No more to do some commercials for us, and the slogan was "United We Ride." And we launched it just as we started to manufacture again, and that was sort of our comeback as a company into the world, opening our factories again and bringing everybody as diverse as we could possibly be as a business and a brand, and celebrate diversity and inclusion. And that's one of the reasons why I took the job, is because I believe in an incredible American icon and the transformation and the opportunity to contribute positively to a very divisive society. I believe that business and philanthropy and working together can make a significant impact, and I realize that politicians and politics can only do so much, and often they don't. But business can be a significant force for good, and not just because it's the right thing to do, it's the right thing also for the business itself. So being inclusive, I think, is a critical component.
Okay. Except it's not, right? Like even Larry Fink, who kind of championed this stuff from the very beginning, he's figured that out. It's not. And Rob and I have talked about this a lot, especially as it relates to 76 Research, because it's one of the reasons we founded the company. We're like, listen, these people are just kind of way out over their skis, putting all this stuff ahead of actual profits, which matter, right, to the economy. Let me share with you, this was fascinating to me, just exactly what his background was. So he went into the company and apparently was like leading their, special division. Let me see. I'm going to actually pull this up here in good old Wikipedia in real time, because I was really kind of like, oh my goodness, like he has always had sort of a history, if you would, of being very, very, very liberal. I mean, he worked with Richard Branson. All good. Like, listen, I'm not saying that capitalism and, all this green stuff and inclusivity and et cetera, like, look, if you can make money on it, I guess, but at some point you do actually have to deliver products that people do want. And I think that that's what gets sort of lost in the shuffle here. Anyway, he came into the company and actually started working there, I believe in 2011. And I think it was in some kind of green capacity, and then wound up going on and becoming, if you would, here we go. Okay, right off the Wikipedia page, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Zients, he assumed the helm of first interim CEO in February 2020, but prior to that, he had come in to lead, where did it go? Lead this special, there we go, Sustainability Committee. Okay, so he was chair of the Harley Davidson Sustainability Committee since its inception in 2011. So he was so proud of that. And then you just heard from him. He wanted to become CEO of the company so that he could change American culture and make it more inclusive and this, that, and the other. And instead, what does he do? He sends jobs to Thailand and annoys everyone. And the company's going to, I don't know why they'd pick him. Why would they pick this guy to run this iconic American company? I ask you that question. Tell me your ideas. I mean, again, like, where are the smart, intelligent people in the room saying, we expect a return on our investment, we need to make money off of that? I don't know. But there's not a lot of smart liberals. Like, we know that. I know that. You know that. Because if you were a smart person, you wouldn't actually come up with some of the crazy economic theories that these people come up with. And you would actually be a student of history and realize that all those things that they keep coming up with over and over again, they don't work. And then they get this other weird idea. I mean, the whole like women can't be pretty thing, but men can be pretty and wear women's swimsuits and women's clothing and That's a little weird. Especially when, like, they're not happy about the women wearing the swimsuits. Do you get where I'm going? Well, Ana Paulina Luna certainly does. The representative from Florida has gotten sort of caught in the thick of it, shall we say, because some liberals over on TikTok decided to share an old video of her that she posted and was very proud of. Looking fantastic, might I say, in a swimsuit. She used to design swimsuits. She was a MAGA influencer. And then, wow, this came out and she posted it on her own page. She was very proud of the swimsuit and obviously very proud of her physique. So this is Ana Paulina Luna. She's the representative, one of the representatives from Florida. And she looks good, right? I mean, Drew, I didn't get to see it so much. I was looking at my notes. Can we watch again? I mean, I'm sorry, but like, she looks good. So are you really going to have a problem with that if you're a liberal? Well, apparently they're like making fun of her because she looks good. I mean, Dylan Mulvaney can wear a swimsuit and they think Dylan looks great, but Ana, she's not allowed to. You're going where you shouldn't go when you wear a swimsuit as a woman, apparently. She was funny. She was out on Twitter and she's like, yeah, I wear swimsuits to the beach and I wear mineral sunscreen too. Let's take a look. So the New York Post first reported on, here she is commenting. There are better things to do with your time than digging up modeling photos of me from almost a decade ago. The left is attempting to make this thing, yet can't define a woman. Very low IQ behavior. Get over it. She tweeted out a statement saying, great minds discuss ideas, average minds discuss events, small minds discuss people. Yeah. I mean, it's wild that they would get so upset about seeing a woman in a swimsuit. She also points out she was featured in Maxim and Sports Illustrated and that she designed swimsuits and women's shirts and writes, I'm confirming that indeed I have worn swimsuits and you can tell I am biologically a woman. Go, girl, go. I mean, this is just so unbelievably stupid that they would make an issue out of this. But then again, think of who they are. Oh, do we have some pictures? I mean, like, what is this? Is it? Okay, you know what? Like, Andrea's a little up there. Rachel's playing for the other team. Who is that in the middle? Do you know, Drew? Like, I don't even know who that is. Is it Simone something? Anyway, like, it's not, let me tell you, those are no Ana Lunas, right? And here's a group of women that I guess were arrested out on the West Coast in one of these crazy protests. And we can compare and contrast. There's like a group of conservative women that have come out with these t-shirts saying, yes, I'm conservative. And they kind of feel like just so wholesome, right? In comparison, like what is going on? Like, what is the point in trying to make yourself look bad? I think there's some men in that photo too, although these days, you never can tell, right? Like that's part of the idea. But if you happen to look great in a swimsuit and you happen to be conservative, God help you, they're all over you. That's feminism for you. Think about it. I mean, you're supposed to suppress all your femininity. You're not supposed to want to be a wife like Snow White, right? Snow White. No, can't be Snow White. Can't be waiting around or looking for Prince Charming. You have to be your own person, your own, I'm just going to say, I actually think that one of the hardest things to do in life is to meet the right person. And it doesn't happen for everyone. I mean, that's sad, right? I mean, you don't want to live a lonely existence. And I feel bad for people that don't have the opportunity to meet the right one or to have a family. I mean, Kamala Harris, not having kids, I don't know if that was by choice or if she was just so busy and so focused on career and politics, she never got the chance to have a family, or maybe she just didn't meet the right guy. I mean, I'm telling you, Willie Brown was definitely not the right one. So you miss out on one of the most major parts of life. And yet they want to encourage that. And they want women to look, I guess, more like men and men to look more like women. And ultimately, that is not good for society. All right? You know that. I know that. Why don't they know that? What is the point? What are they trying to do? We played you a clip the other day of Kamala Harris talking about how she was going to promote more greenness. And she was going to do that by encouraging people to have less children because you need a smaller population so everybody can enjoy the world. Whoa, okay. What are we going to get into China's one-child policy? We actually need more people, thank you very much, Kamala. We actually need more families. That's actually kind of important. And it's actually really critical, especially in these Western societies, that have made these other choices. And so fundamentally, it's just not good for the economy. It's not good for human beings. And yes, Ana Luna looks fantastic, right? Fantastic, fantastic, fantastic. All right, I want to go to a rather scary story. I mean, this is total bedlam. We just learned hackers have basically gotten everybody's social security number. Like, this is a wild story. And this is not getting enough ink. I think it's not getting enough ink because, well, it kind of reflects rather badly, maybe, just maybe, on the Harris-Biden administration. I don't know. I mean, maybe people aren't interested. I'm kind of interested. I mean, this is kind of terrifying, right? They apparently got a lot of social security numbers. Everybody's social security number. Gee, what was it, like billion? Because apparently they got everybody who like may have ever lived social security number. So the statistics are really pretty wild as you look at some of these stories. This one coming to us from the LA Times. But sensitive data. They got addresses, they got phone numbers, they got dates of birth, social security numbers, all of it. And apparently this information was up for sale on the dark web. Drew, thanks for helping me out. 2.9 billion records are saying that they got. I mean, that's pretty darn wild. And so now there's a class action lawsuit against this company, Jericho Pictures, which is a background check and fraud prevention company that does business as National Public Data, a cyber criminal group that calls itself USDOD, uploaded a large database titled National Public Data to a dark web forum. Oh, goodness. They put it up for sale for a paltry $3.5 million. Guys, I think you could have probably charged a little more. Anyway, they're going to be in probably a lot of trouble because now this is national news. It is a big story. People are alarmed about it. I mean, obviously, you got to safeguard your social security number, make sure that if you're at risk, it sounds like we're all at risk. Everybody's at risk. So you got to make sure that you button down the hatches in terms of credit, et cetera. And there's apparently some websites you can go to figure out if your social security number has been leaked. I think it's probably safe to say like everybody got swept up in this one. And so it's pretty concerning. Look, there's just so much that they can get at nowadays. And the world's changing. It's changing really, really fast. So that's an alarming story. I don't think that reflects really well on the administration who's had, frankly, a lot of security lapses. And now we get word that Iran is allegedly hacking into the presidential campaigns. Listen, like, who's on first, right? Like, shouldn't we be like light years ahead of everyone else? How is it that you're allowing all of these social security numbers to get out there? How are you allowing campaigns to get hacked into? How did you allow a kid to smuggle in a weapon and nearly kill the former president of the United States who's topping the GOP ticket? I mean, at some point you start to say, we need better accountability. And I'll leave it there because I know a lot of people think a lot of things about that. And I think we need to wait and see and get all the information. But listen, I mean, those people didn't do their jobs. They just didn't do their jobs. I want to know why. I want to know why Donald Trump didn't have more people there. Why were they giving them all to Dr. Jill so she could go do some dinner? He's out there in the open air with tens of thousands of people. My gosh. I mean, and this is not partisan. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Kamala deserves the same. You know what? They all deserve the proper protection because if they had taken it, I mean, think about what that would have meant. Scary. Really, really scary. But there's a lot of scary things happening nowadays. A lot. Fox News crystallizing it in this one little soundbite because, you wonder who's coming into the country nowadays, given that we have these open, porous borders because Kamala never fixed them. Borders are that she was. Well, here's the answer.
And over the weekend, Fox cameras witnessed hundreds of Chinese nationals crossing illegally here in Hakumba. Again, most of them single adults, very few, if any, with little children with them. John and Sandra, this is not normal. These numbers are shooting through the roof when it comes to the Chinese. Just to put it in perspective, look at this stunning graphic. CBP sources telling Fox News in the last 4.5 months since October 1st, there have been more than 20,000 Chinese nationals encountered at our southern border. That is up more than 4,000 1,000% over all of fiscal year 2021, when there were just 450 Chinese nationals encountering. Keep in mind, we still have almost 8 months left in fiscal year 2024 to go.
Whew. Okay, so that is alarming. A 4,000% increase in Chinese nationals coming into the United States. Why is that? Okay, and why don't we have more? I mean, China's not exactly a friend, shall we say? Thank you very much. We can't handle it to begin with. Like, we all know that. Look, America is a wonderful place, and I'm thrilled that everybody wants to come here. And you know what? We're a pretty great group of people. We're very philanthropic. We're very generous. In some ways, very altruistic. Like, all those good things, right? However, at some point, push comes to shove, and communities can't take it. New York Post running a cover story today about how it's going to cost some $5 billion to deal with all the illegal migrants that have come into New York. And they predict that that number is going to spiral out of control in the next 5 years. Well, who's going to pay for that? Anybody who could left New York, including me, thank you very much. Like, who wants to live in New York City? You can't send your kids to school. You're worried about just walking down the street. It's a filthy mess. And now you're going to be stuck with all that liability. Because cities, communities, towns, states can't handle it. This is why you just have to be a realist. You have to be a realist. And by the way, being a realist is actually good for those that are trying to come in. Because think about the law of unintended consequences. When you encourage that mass migration, you encourage illegal behavior. You encourage kids to get put in harm's way in the hands of bad people that are going to take them across. This is not a humane way to do it. The humane way to do it is to say, you know what? No luck, no how. You're not coming in. It's not going to happen. And then you discourage people. There was a lot of bickering about the wall. Maybe the wall would have actually been symbolic in some ways. Maybe you need actual ramifications. Maybe you can't have the vice president of the United States of America, who's now running for the presidency, get up there and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to open all the detention centers. Day one, she told us. Remember, we played that sound for you too. Unbelievable stuff. But Kamala Harris and Joe Biden don't know what they're doing, unless they do. I mean, that might even be scarier. And that's why we really need to be worried. That's why this election is so incredibly important, because it may be your last chance. Think of what she's doing to manipulate the media. Think of what, and it's not even her, by the way, the media used to hate her. Like, it's that they're taking their orders from one Barack Obama and another David Plouffe and David Axelrod, who have CNN and the New York Times on speed dial, not to mention MSNBC. And so they have their marching orders. They're doing exactly what they're told to do. So suddenly Kamala, oh, she's pie in the sky. She's fantastic. She's great. She has no policies. She's talking about rolling out a policy package of some sort next week. Her staff is like, whoa, what do you mean? They actually don't think that she should talk to any media at all. I mean, why should she, right? She's doing fine, just not talking. The minute she opens her mouth, the minute she risks being made a total laughingstock because she can't actually speak. All she can do is stick to a prompter. No prompter here on the Trish Regan show, by the way. No, we don't need those. We don't like those, because you ought to be able to be intelligent enough to talk about these policy issues in a real way, in a meaningful way, in an intelligent way, which she cannot do, nor could Biden. I mean, I don't know where they come up with these people. Meanwhile, we got new problems, not just Chinese migrants crossing into the border, but more tension on the international front, because it seems that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are driving Russia straight into China's arms. Did you see the newest headline out of Reuters, exclusively reporting that first Russian-China barter trade may come this autumn, according to sources? So they're going to barter trade. I guess, you give us energy, we give you something else. And they have to do this because of all the sanctions. You see Kamala and Joe put in a secondary round of sanctions. This was tied to Russia, Ukraine. And here's the thing. I actually like sanctions. I'm a big believer in using sanctions judiciously. and in ways that actually get the results that you intend, right? That you want. I think Donald Trump loves sanctions because he's, okay, we can sanction, we can tariff. He really loves tariffs. We can tariff them, we can do this, that, and the other. There's a lot of financial tools that you should always be using, frankly, ladies and gentlemen, before you get to the point where you're sending these tanks in, or you're sending kids into these horrific conflicts, which you're witnessing right there on the front lines there in Russia and Ukraine. But because we've picked sides in this, we have to say, okay, no more energy coming from Russia. It actually drove the internal economy of Russia quite high because they were still able to sell their energy. They just sold it for more because we took all of that, the major source of natural gas for all of Europe. We took it right off the market. So guess what? Natural gas prices went up. Energy prices went up. Apparently, we didn't think about that when Jennifer Granholm, our energy secretary, was just shutting down all the potential energy that we could have gotten from here in the USA. Now, we're not allowed to drill because, well, we're supposed to transition to something else that nobody else is ready for. In fact, Toyota, I think, just came out today and said they're actually going to not be manufacturing EVs. They're going to focus on the flex, right? The flex where you can do EV or you can do gas because people want the optionality. Indeed. So gas prices have gone sky high. Natural gas prices have gone sky high. Americans are feeling it vis-a-vis inflation all the way at the grocery store shelves. And in the meantime, China and Russia are like, I love you, right? They love each other. Like we're driving them straight together. It doesn't seem like a very smart policy. If I were there, I'd kind of want to drive a wedge in between China and Russia, wouldn't you? And, another wedge between Russia and Iran and China and Iran. I mean, it just kind of makes political, strategic sense, but not like anybody's thinking that way. I don't think these are especially strategic thinkers. I was going to say I don't think they're especially bright. I mean, certainly that's the case in terms of Kamala, in terms of Joe. But Antony Blinken, you know what? He's probably a pretty bright guy, our Secretary of State. He just happens to always be wrong. So whatever his analysis is, he's thought it through and he's kind of covered his bases. It's just that he's always wrong. Like he's always been wrong. McCain warned of him back in 2014. He was like, oh my gosh, this guy wants to be Deputy Secretary of State. I can't actually stand here and allow this. He gave big speech there on Capitol Hill because he was worried about Antony Blinken eventually costing American soldiers their lives. And sure enough, what do we see? I mean, the guy was not even there barely a day, and we had to get into the withdrawal of Afghanistan, which was disastrous. Really, really disastrous and completely avoidable, completely preventable. And then in the meantime, now we learn that China and Russia are trying to create this sort of monetary type thing, a barter system all on their own because we've pushed them to the brink. And listen, this can come back to haunt us in more ways than you think. You got a country called Venezuela just 2.5 hours off the coast of Florida. And guess what we saw there? Just this past week, they were very proudly pushing this one out. They got Russian warships in Venezuela. I think we have a picture. There you go. Okay, so it's a Russian naval ship. And somebody with Russian allegiances tweeted this out, and they had some Russian patriotic music in the background of this video. But that's the upshot, all right? So why are we looking at Russian naval ships 2.5 hours off the coast of Florida? I don't think that's a very good idea, right? And you got a big messed up situation because that's an election that was clearly, I mean, ask anyone on this right now. All sides agree. Maduro stole the election. And now Maria Corina Machado, who was leading the opposition, has to be in hiding. They want to go after her. They want to go after Eduardo Gonzalez, who was running for president against Maduro. I mean, that's really, really messed up. What do you think Hugo Chavez did the day he came into power? First thing, ladies and gentlemen, he restacked the court with his friends. He got the court on his side, the Supreme Court there in Venezuela. I have every reason to believe that we need to worry about these kind of things. Why? Well, Donald Trump is threatening to sue the DOJ for $100 million related to the Mar-a-Lago saga, which he says is unconstitutional, and he wants to take it to the Supreme Court. And this is what the left is freaking out about, among other things. They're so terrified about this guy winning the day that Kamala's willing to flip-flop on policies. Things like, oh, no taxes on tips. Well, that was Trump's, but now it's Kamala's. Because she's got to do something to deal with the pain that people feel, the very real pain tied to inflation. We got new CPI numbers out this week, up 2.9%. Everybody's like, oh, hallelujah, it's the best since 2021. Let me tell you, it's still up 2.9%. And I don't think inflation's going away because I think the Federal Reserve, with its newest rate cut that we're most likely going to get, and we probably, I mean, given the slowdown in our economy, we might even be due for it, dare I say, right? Because they're always late and they're always wrong. Milton Friedman once said you could replace the Fed with a computer. He was right. Anyway, I sat down with Kurt Couchman, who leads the fiscal policy division there. He's a senior fellow at AFP, Americans for Prosperity. And we talked all about this because we need some solutions. Listen, we're $35 trillion in debt and still counting. And Kamala wants more giveaways. Oh my gosh, not good news. Watch. Inflation, as well as Kamala Harris's copycatting of Donald Trump's policies. I'm joined by none other than our friend Kurt Couchman. He's a senior fellow for fiscal policy at Americans for Prosperity. It is good to see you again, Kurt.
It's great to see you, Trish. Always great to be back.
Well, I mean, inflation, I'm going to get to in a second because any which way you slice this thing, I mean, I just don't have a good feeling about it. And I think that when the Fed cuts, as they're anticipated to do, we're going to have more problems in the next month. But ahead of that, let's just get into what she's talking about in terms of this no tax on tips. So this is something that Donald Trump very proudly debuted. And there was some dispute, even within the Republican Party, right? You know, was this good or bad, whatever. Let's put all that aside for a second, because here's the deal. He's got an idea. And what did she do? She copycatted him. And what I think is kind of funny about this, and you know more than me, but she's actually the one who cast the final vote originally, telling the IRS to go after the waiters and waitresses that maybe weren't declaring their cash tips. What do you think of this?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, it is funny to see President Trump propose one thing and then Vice President Harris being like, oh, me too. But when it comes to the Inflation Reduction Act, that provided a lot of new funding for the Internal Revenue Service to go after lots of different folks and do enforcement, including a special initiative for tips for folks that are getting part of their compensation through tips. Now, tips are money. Compensation is all your money that you're getting, and you would think that if people are getting the same income, they should be taxed similarly. It's horizontal equity. So the idea of not taxing tips while taxing the income of people that are getting it not through tips that are making the same thing, that just doesn't make a whole lot of sense in terms of fairness.
You know, I just think it's sort of ironic, right? That she's now trying to claim his policies after having really obviously stood for something else. I mean, I keep going back to this. I don't know who the lady is. And by the way, she doesn't want to tell us because she's not doing any interviews and she's not giving any press conferences. And you go to her website, good luck trying to figure out what the heck policy this woman stands for. But I do know one thing. She was vice president under a time when we had a lot of inflation. Kurt, talk to me about that because look, I mean, you didn't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out the handwriting was on the wall. When government spends that much and you get the Fed printing that much, what do you get? Higher grocery prices.
Absolutely. Now, first of all, Vice President Harris was Senator Harris before she became vice president. There's 4 years of legislation that she introduced or co-sponsored or voted for in the Senate. So there is quite a record there. We just have to go look at it. Now, you're absolutely right about inflation. Inflation is created by the government. When the money supply grows faster than the real production of goods and services in the economy, you're going to have inflation, a lot or a little bit, depending on how big the gap is. Now, what happened over the last couple of years that was different was that Congress and the White House forced the Federal Reserve's hand. They created so much new spending, all debt financed, that the Federal Reserve felt like it had no option but to absorb $4 trillion of additional Treasury debt in order to keep the markets fluid and in order to keep the bond markets from freaking out. So in this case, we saw that Congress's reckless spending actually dominated, that's the technical term, dominated the Federal Reserve's monetary policy. And that meant that the money supply grew much, much faster than the economy, and we got inflation because of it.
That's interesting. So you're saying that the two were actually linked, that the Fed was not left with much of a choice only because of what government did.
Yeah, I mean, the Federal Reserve has become the lender of last resort to the federal government during the pandemic crisis, and it certainly could be again if we don't fix federal budgeting.
Let's talk about how we fix this, right? We're in a major mess as far as inflation goes, and I think whoever comes in to the Oval Office is going to have a problem. I know Trump's talking about, he wants more say over the Federal Reserve, et cetera. What realistically do you think we could do in the near future to get this stuff under control? Because people can't really take much more. They can't deal with it. So how do we fix?
We need to get the deficits under control. We do primarily have an overspending problem in terms of the federal government. And part of the reason for that is that Congress doesn't do a budget, and it never has. It does an appropriations process, which is all of 26% of spending and none of the revenue. So it's a quarter of one side of the budget. We do need to get Congress to fix the way that it evaluates programs and checks up on them. So one of the things that we're talking about is getting Congress to do a comprehensive budget with all the spending, all the revenue that gets all the committees and all the members involved in seeing what makes sense to keep and what doesn't, so that we can make sure there's enough funding for the priorities, the things we actually need the federal government to do. But there are a number of other fixes to the federal budget process. We need to change the incentives that members of Congress have.
Okay,
We've
that's
seen
important. Right,
Yep.
like that's important. So just to wind it back, you're some congressman from some Timbuktu place in the middle of the country, and you have a chance to actually get more money for your district. Well, what do you want to do? You want to get more money for the district. You don't necessarily care, right, where the money's coming from. You just want more money for your district. And when you multiply that across the rest of the members of Congress and senators as well. I mean, everybody's looking for their share to help get them re-elected, because you know what? If they can bring manna from heaven effectively, into their district, if they bring all that money into their district, then that's going to help their re-election chances. So how do you incentivize them to do the right thing when they're so incentivized to do the wrong one?
Yeah, I mean, the electoral incentives are always going to be there for members of Congress, but you need to have a process where you can go through and clean up the old deadwood. There's stuff that has been authorized and sitting on the books for years, if not decades, that current members are getting no credit for because it was their predecessors, sometimes several predecessors ago, that actually created the program. But a lot of times those are relatively small dollar amounts, but it makes it hard to see the bigger picture because you're focused on all this mess. So you do need to clean it out, but there's also some bigger picture stuff that needs to be done. The healthcare policy that the federal government has is a total mess. We could be much more efficient with that while giving people better care, better access, more affordable healthcare. So there's a lot of ways.
No, I agree with you. And by the way, I was just talking to Lauren Stewart, everyone, about that the other day.
Yeah.
I encourage you to go and look at that video. We posted that because she had some great ideas. I want to ask you about greed inflation, because they're talking about it like greedflation. My colleague over at 76 Research, a financial research company I have, and I sat down and we looked at all of these numbers, and we were looking at the profitability of these retailers, and actually their profitability margins have shrunk. And why have those margins shrunk? Because guess what? They're not making as much money as they used to. So even though the Biden-Harris administration wants to sit there and point fingers and say it's their fault, they're just charging more because they can charge more. And the food suppliers as well. In actuality, Kurt, that's not the case. At least when I look at the raw numbers, they're having to pay more in terms of production. I mean, we got PP out yesterday, CPI today. This is how it works. Producers pay more for goods. Then they transfer those increased costs onto consumers. I don't know why the Biden administration is trying to confuse people about it.
Well, they want to distract from their own record. I mean, Congress and the Biden administration in particular created inflation, and so they're casting about for a scapegoat. But I mean, look, when I go to the grocery store, I see prices actually starting to come down now. And when you look at the data, you see that profit margins are not out of whack. Historically, corporate profits have been about 10% of GDP. That's where they are today, actually a little bit less than that because of the pullback that you're seeing. They were up just a tiny bit during the pandemic when Congress and the Fed were just dumping money into the economy, but they've renormalized. And as long as Congress and the Fed don't start dumping money in the economy again, then we won't see that again. Corporate profits will be sort of right where they are normally. This is just a tactic to distract from what actually happened and what actually caused inflation.
I want to remind everybody they can go to Bidenomics.com. Cleverly, you guys over at Americans for Prosperity got that URL. I don't know what happened to all the TikTokers in the White House, but Bidenomics.com, where you can get real solutions and really understand this problem and kind of cut through and actually get to the meat of this. Because, look, I realize economics gets really political, but it doesn't need to be. There's real numbers behind all this. And I think if we focus on those numbers, we can actually come up with the right solutions here. One of which is not to just be political about it and blame those greedy corporations. Listen, I wish it were that simple, right? I wish it were that simple. Kurt Couchman, thank you so much. I just want to point out, people can follow you on Twitter, get a lot of good economic numbers, and at Kurt Couchman. Good to see you, and we'll talk again soon. Oh, my thanks to Kurt. That was a really interesting interview. Of course, you guys, listen, inflation is just here, and we've had a team of people in the White House, one of whom is now running again and wants you to believe that she had nothing to do with it. But, you heard from him. And the reality is this stuff starts at the top. It starts with Congress. It starts with the White House. And it really impacts everyone, impacts everybody in pretty scary ways. I want to encourage you to make sure that you like the show, that you subscribe to the show, that you hit the bell, because I'm here every day live. One of these days we're going to actually settle on a real hard time. But in the meantime, you really need to hit that bell. I'm not kidding, because, it fluctuates, shall we say. I just want to quickly say it's great to have all of our team members here, because we do have a lot of team members on this show, and that has been growing and growing and growing. So thank you. We do some occasional sort of like one-on-ones with you guys, just me and you. And it's wonderful to see so many people joining this. Mike Costa, great to have you. Ian, peace of mind, right? Like, we're back. Peace of Mind was trying to watch yesterday. We had a little bit of a snafu, and there was something that went down with the live. I don't know exactly. All the more reason. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you like. Hey, if you want to know more about markets and investing, go over to 76research.com. 76. Get it? 1776, right? There's a method to the madness. 76research.com, and I will see you right back here on the show tomorrow.